Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nastiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandamaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Hare Krishna. So we are on chapter 8. Today's discussion will be on chapter number 8 of the Bhagavad Gita. It's entitled as Attaining the Supreme. And this is the second in series of the section of Bhagavad Gita known as Bhakti Yoga. Krishna has explained the process of Bhakti Yoga in 6 chapters. For other forms of yoga, he has given very few verses. But when it comes to talking about Bhakti Yoga, it is given 6 full chapters, and every other chapter as well ends with emphasis on Bhakti Yoga. So therefore, we have to understand the essence. Understanding the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, we did not go through the whole Gita. Just understanding the essence, just like if there is a cricket match that took place yesterday. So we don't have to know each and every detail of every over. We just have to understand who won ultimately and who was the main scorer, man of the match. Just knowing details. Similarly, ultimately, the message of the Gita is meant to bring us closer to Krishna, closer to God, and surrender unto Him. But since not everybody is on the same platform, therefore, Krishna talks about various topics and taking into consideration our caliber. He talks about karma, dhyana, jnana, and ultimately emphasizes the Bhakti Yoga path. Connecting to Him through bhakti, through engagement in devotional service is the best path. So this chapter begins with a question. Again, our life is filled with questions and answers. When we get up, we are asking a question. Where is my phone? Where is my bed tea? Where is my newspaper? When is the party? When will the lockdown get over? Like these. So every moment we see that our minds are filled with questions and we are seeking answers. And the animals are also doing that. How to eat, sleep nicely, enjoy, and try to protect whatever we have. So these 4 basic propensities are common between humans and animals. So everybody is basically asking a question. A bird is also asking a question in the morning. Where's my food? Where's my mama in the evening? When will she return with the food? So life is filled with questions and answers. But what kind of questions a human being is expected to ask? That is answered by Vedanta Sutra, which says Atthato Brahma Jigyasa. Anybody who is born as a human being is supposed to inquire about God, about the goal of life, about the purpose of life. Where do I come from? Where will I go? How do I re-establish my relationship with God? Who is He? Why do I suffer even if I don't want to? How can I become eternal? How can I become free from miseries? An animal cannot ask these questions. So a human being is supposed to ask questions about these things, not about how I can eat nicely, sleep nicely, earn more so that I can eat, sleep, mate, and defend nicely. All this is already fixed by destiny. As soon as we are born in this world, our happiness quota and distress quota is fixed. The amount of happiness we are supposed to get will come to us even if we do nothing. And the amount of distress that is going to come into our life is also fixed, even if we do nothing. The amount of success and failure is also destined. So, how much ever we try on a material platform to change this, we can't help it. However, if you try and come to spiritual platform, connect with the Lord, that's why it's very important to have a solid spiritual foundation, that connection with the Lord, because that can even change our destiny. Otherwise, it's between us and our destiny, and destiny is supreme. So happiness and distress, pain, pleasure, profit, loss is fixed. So rather than worrying about these things, we have to focus on the ultimate goal of life, which is self-realization, God realization. Human life is not meant for increasing our obligations in this world. It is meant to put an end to all those obligations. It is not meant to increase our karmic stock in this world. It is meant to put an end to the karmic stock. It is not meant to make another arrangement to transmigrate to another species. It is meant to put an end to all kinds of transmigration and to go back to a real home, the spiritual world. So, this topic, specifically this chapter, addresses a very, very, you can say, unwelcoming topic. It's a reality, but nobody wants to talk about it, but everyone has to face it. So, Gita, sometimes people say it's a sectarian book. It's not. Gita talks about death, birth, old age, disease. Now, do you think only the Hindus or the followers of the Gita are going through this, or the Indians go through this? Whole world is going through it. So it's a book of principles which applies to everyone. So this topic specifically addresses this aspect, death. And it is important sometimes to meditate on death. In the Latin American festivals, sometimes during a festival, they hang skulls in the arena just to remind themselves about the temporary nature of our existence. It is very sobering sometimes to meditate on death. It will help us uh, become sober, slow down, introspect, and become less anxious, less stressful. Otherwise, we are running hard to acquire things, but when we take a step back, understand, Arey Baba, these can be finished any moment, and you can't take even a penny with you. So you stop unnecessarily working hard, because even if you run around or don't run around, the amount of happiness, distress is already destined. That will come to you. That's how it works. Just like you do not pray for distress, you do not work hard for distress till it comes into your life. Similarly, happiness also comes, enters, and sometimes at the least expected moment, just like distress enters at the least expected moment. Many of the yogis, they go to Banaras. They sit on Mani Karnika Ghat, where any time the day you go, any time of the year, many dead bodies burning. So you will see many yogis sit there and they meditate on those dead bodies burning, reminding themselves of the temporary nature of our existence. Like sometimes I meditate, or sometimes this thought pops up in my mind about death. One day we all have to die. Jatasya hi dhruva mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasyaham uh, nigraham manne, something like that. I forgot the second line. But essentially this verse says that anybody who is born is sure to die, and anybody who's died is sure to be born again. This is from the second chapter, verse number 27. Tasyaham apariharyarthe natvam sochitum arhasi. This is the second line. So it is important to understand. Therefore, the scriptures explain there are four real problems in life which we must be focusing upon to solve them: birth, old age, disease, and death. A human being is supposed to think about how I can put an end to these real problems, because how much ever you try, you can't stop them from coming. But human life is a guarantee that if you connect with Krishna 100%, then this is the last time we will experience death. Because after this, if you're connecting with Krishna, as Krishna explains later, anybody who worships me comes to me in his abode. Then we get an eternal life. It's not that by connecting to Krishna we'll not die, but this is the last time we'll have to die, because you've got this material body made up of matter. It has to end. And when you meditate on this, then automatically you start feeling some sort of detachment. You slow down. Then you can think about other things in life. Otherwise, we are so passionate about some material achievements, running around trying to acquire material things, that so we are running around like this in passion. How can you think properly? To think properly, you need to be in the mode of goodness, not in the mode of passion. So it is very important to hear from the scriptures to slow us down. So sometimes miseries are not, sometimes always miseries are welcome, because they are uh, giving us reminders of the reality of life. This will only help us uh, take a step back. Otherwise, we are running around, oh, more money, more property, more followers, and finished. How can you think about the ultimate goal of life? So this is a harsh reality which everyone has to face, but nobody wants to talk about. So Krishna addresses this particular topic in this chapter, and how one can conquer death, how one can surpass death. Arjuna asks various questions at the beginning of this chapter. He says, Krishna, I want to know. And you see, Arjuna is asking questions again and again. At no point Krishna tells him, why are you asking so many questions? Because asking questions is a sign of intelligence, and it is recommended. Because doubts are like demons. If you do not destroy them, they will destroy us. Our whole existence will be finished. So at no point Arjuna is discouraged from asking questions. Here he asks uh, many questions. What is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? What is the Lord of sacrifice? And how does he live in the body? O Madhusudana. And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So immediately Krishna answers out of these 8 questions, 7 questions. And the answer to the 8th question is spread over the entire chapter. What was the 8th question? How can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? Because the perfection of life is Ante Narayana Smriti, that at the end of life we can remember the Lord, because that will decide where we go. We'll go to the ultimate destination. We have to go somewhere. So why not aspire for a place where there is no more misery? We can't live here forever. So let's make arrangements so that we can prepare for a better destination, invest in our afterlife. So immediately, Krishna answers many of his questions. So he says, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman. So please understand, this word Brahman comes again and again in the scriptures. And sometimes it is referred to Krishna. Brahman basically means Aham Brahmasmi. It refers to somebody who is spiritual. So the Lord is also spiritual. Sometimes the Brahman is referred to Krishna personally, his form, just a general term to describe him. Sometimes Brahman refers to the impersonal aspect of God, the formless aspect, which is very inferior to the form of Krishna. And sometimes Brahman is also referred to the soul, because soul is also spiritual. Here, uh, Brahman is referring to the soul. So Krishna says Brahman is the indestructible, transcendental living entity, the soul. And his eternal nature, the Adhyatma. What is that? That's called the self. So when you see the self, it is describing the soul. We are the soul, self. So when we talk about self-help, unless that help is for the soul, it is not considered self-help. There's a lot of business happening in the name of self-help, but these people don't even know who the self is. So Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, he used to say, how can you help the self when you don't even know who that self is? We're just helping the body and the mind, which we are not, and which is simply matter. But the soul is, the conscious force is the soul, which is hankering for love, affection, satisfaction, freedom from bondage, frustration, and suffering. How can somebody else who is suffering, and by feeding somebody else, that person who is suffering is satisfied? Suppose I am, say, 10 kilometers away somewhere and I'm feeling hungry. I call up somebody, say, I'm feeling hungry, eat something. That will not satisfy my hunger. So the self is in need of food and we are feeding the body. This is an incompatible thing. How will it ever satisfy me? The self is the soul. Krishna is personally explaining here. So unless that help is rendered to the soul, that means soul is spiritual. It needs help in the similar nature. Unless we provide spiritual guidance, spiritual help to the person, it is all a money-making business. It is all fake and it is first-class cheating. Because the self is something else. You are supposed to help somebody and you're helping somebody else. That's called cheating. Suppose, for example, there are various bodies in the government and they get some money to help some people who are in need, but they use that money to help somebody else. That's called cheating. So therefore, unless that self is helped and soul is spiritual, food for the soul is spiritual, has to be spiritual. The soul cannot be happy. We cannot be happy unless we are in connection with Krishna. Souls are his parts and parcels. So that is the self. Third question is answered. What is karma? He had asked, or fruitive activities. This is activities that are performed by living entities in this world, which make them transmigrate from one material body to other, is called karma. So as long as you're performing karma, the transmigration will continue. So we have to perform a karma, that means activities in the service of God. And he's asked a question, what is the material manifestation? He says, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, this material world, is adhibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods like those of the sun and moon, is called Adi Deva. He is the, what are the demigods? The Lord of sacrifice, who is Yajneshwara. The Lord of sacrifices, Adi Yajna, Krishna says, I, the Supreme Lord. I am the beneficiary of all Yajnas. I am the Lord of sacrifices. And another question before this was, what are the demigods? He says the universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adi Deva. So this is basically encompassing everything. That is the original Deva, Adi Deva. So he's answered 7 questions. Now the 8th question was, how can those devoted to Krishna know you at the time of death? So very important information now Krishna gives in this chapter. He also talks about later when a person leaves this world, at what time of the day, which is the destination of that soul. So very important celebrated verse of the Gita. He starts answering the 8th question now. Antakale cha mameva smaran mukva kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyat samshayah. He says, now this is very important. Whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Anybody, Krishna says, who remembers me at the last moment, he will attain me, my abode. My nature means my abode. This is material nature, that's a spiritual nature, the spiritual world. Ante Narayana Smriti. And this is considered the perfection of life. Next verse, Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bhavam Tyajante Kalevaram Tam Tam Evaiti Kaunteya Sada Tad Bhava Bhavita. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits this body, the son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So very clear. Many times people ask, oh, where has the soul gone? The soul has gone to the place and got a body, or maybe in the transition, depending on the last thoughts. The last thoughts will depend on what he has done throughout his life, what kind of consciousness the person has cultivated. So therefore, life is a preparation, death is the examination. We cannot remember the Lord at the last moment if we have not practiced remembering Him during our lifetime. So the practice makes us perfect. We cannot pass the exam at the end of a semester if you have not studied during the entire semester. And we cannot cheat. So the last thought will decide where the soul is going. And Krishna says, anybody who remembers me at the last moment will come to me. So it is very important, therefore, to hear, chant, remember, to cultivate the divine consciousness so that at the end of life also we can remember the Lord. And therefore, he encourages, gives a very, very important message now in the next verse. Now, we might be thinking, but remembrance means we have to continuously practice remembering, we have to leave everything and then practice remembering. Look at what Krishna says. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhyacha Mayarpita mano buddhir mamiveshyasi samshayah. He says, and through Arjuna, he's telling all of us, clarifying the doubt. Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty. So we don't have to give up anything. We have to keep doing our prescribed duties in this world. At the same time, think of him. Ma manusmara yudhyacha. Do your prescribed duty. His duty was fighting. And at the same time, remember me. This is the message of the Gita. Don't have to give up anything. You just have to add this dimension to your life. Just remember him. And in order to be able to remember him, when you're working in this world, you have to definitely devote some exclusive time to cultivate that remembrance. Spend some time every day hearing, chanting, studying the scriptures, doing his seva. This will bring him into our mind even while we are working in this world. And that is the perfection of life. And what is the result? Krishna says, if we can remember him like this, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanya gamina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayan. He who meditates on me as a supreme personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, O Partha, is sure to reach me. So then, if somebody lives in this world like this, he is sure to reach the Supreme Lord. And now Krishna enters into a different section of this chapter where he explains various paths by which that supreme destination is talking about can be achieved. How one can remember him at the time of death, what kind of discipline we can incorporate in our life. So these verses are from 9 to 22. He's talking about this only. So first I'm going to read the translations and I'll take you through the purports of this. One should now, he has spoken about how to reach him. One must remember him, he has spoken at the time of death. Then he will reach him, his abode. But how to practice during our lifetime? So there are various types of spiritualists. There are various methods, Krishna says, people follow. to cultivate that remembrance during the course of their lifetime, so that at the end of life also they can remember him and transfer themselves to his kingdom. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything. Means one should, unless you know the glory of a person, you won't think about him, right? How a person is both very beautiful or wealthy or intelligent or strong or renounced and famous. So therefore, we have to remember the glory. To know the glory, we have to hear about him. So this way we are able to remember. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything. And he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, and who is always a person, is luminous like the sun and is transcendental beyond this material nature. So one should understand the supreme position of the Lord. That will help one to always remember him, because we always like to remember great people. Our hearts are always attracted by somebody's greatness, wealth, beauty, fame, knowledge, strength, renunciation, these opulences. So one should know about God's opulences, that how he is the possessor of all this, and that will help us remember him. And this is how he should be remembered. Smaller than the smallest, he's the smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest. He's the oldest person, yet he's the youngest person. Uh, he's the oldest, but he still remains like a youth, a young boy, like that. So you have to hear his glories. Adyam Puran Purusham Navayovanam. Lord Brahma explains Krishna is the oldest, yet he is the youngest. Adyam Puran Purusham Navayovanam. He's always Navayovan. Vedeshu Durlabhama Durlabhama Atma Bhakta. One who at the time of death fixes his life here between the eyebrows and by the strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The path of yoga he is explaining, and this path is explained in the 6th chapter, how difficult it is. One has to have his mind and senses under full control, sit in a secluded place on a deer skin and half closed eyes, fixing attention on the tip of the nose, withdrawing the senses and mind from all other objects, and back straight. And this way, try to focus or bring the Lord into your heart, and very, very difficult process. Especially the mind has to fully control if you have to attain perfection in this, and the mind is totally out of control. Not a very practical process, but still Krishna is explaining those who attain perfection, this is how they can become perfect in yoga practice. And those who are actually yogis, they can choose the time of their death. They get such power. So what happens when they become perfect in yoga? They can sit in a posture and they can raise their life here up to their this crown chakra, and it comes out. They can choose the most auspicious time, and then they just allow the soul to come out, and they remember the Lord at the last moment, and that's the time when they leave their body. Soul bursts through this skull and goes to the spiritual world, Krishna's planet. So this is one path, but it's very difficult, but it is not impossible, because the last thought, they know this is the moment for me. They can choose the moment, so they focus on Krishna, and that moment they bring their soul out. They can control that. Persons who are learned in the Vedas, who utter Omkar, and who are great sages in the renounced order, enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. Then there are some people who are aiming to merge into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord, Brahma Jyoti. So they are Jnana Yogis. The previous one is about Dhyana Yogi. This is Jnana Yogi. But they ultimately chant Omkar, practice celibacy, and they enter into the Brahman effulgence. So that's the kind of liberation they achieve. But this is the lowest kind of liberation, because you basically uh, your whole individuality becomes dormant. There is no activity, and therefore one has to fall down from the Brahma Jyoti also. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life here at the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. Now, just see the difficult path. There is a reason why he's talking about it. To come to that perfectional stage of remembering the Lord at the last moment and choosing to go wherever you want. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. Now he's explaining the process in detail. First, he explained two parts. One is Dhyana Yoga and Jnana Yoga. Now he's going into the details. Now he's speaking about Bhakti Yoga. How Bhakti Yoga is so simple. And you will see out of the three paths he's spoken about, how Bhakti Yoga is the supreme and simplest. He says, one who always remembers me without deviation, I'm easy to obtain, O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So we don't have to practice all this gymnastics. Continue working at the same time, cultivate remembrance. By this simple method, without giving up anything, you will achieve the same destination which is achieved or sometimes never achieved by the yogis who go through some strict spiritual discipline. So Bhakti Yoga means hearing about him, chanting his names, remembering him, offering prayers, offering worship to the deity. So it is the simplest you see, anybody can take part, but the most powerful. After attaining me, Krishna says, once somebody comes to my abode, he never returns to this world. Now, because the question might be, what happens, Krishna, after we go to your abode? He says, after attaining me, the great souls who are yogis and devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Mamupetya punarjanma dukhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. So he uses two words to describe this world. Why we should leave this and go to the spiritual world? This world is dukhalayam asashvatam. He has stamped it. Dukhalayam means a place of misery, and ashashvatam, temporary. Everything is temporary. You look around, even our body, our relationships, this whole material world is constantly changing. So he says, because this is the world of misery and changing, come to my world. He says, uh, once coming to my abode, nobody wants to come to this miserable world, which is also temporary. Because once you get something higher, why do you want to come back to something lower? And he says, next question in a person's mind might be, okay, I may be facing misery in this planet, but what if I become Indra or Brahma? Krishna explains, Ah Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravritano Arjuna. Mamupetya tu Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vidyate. He says, from the highest planet, Brahma Loka, to the lowest planet, he says, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death takes place. But once somebody attains to my abode, son of Kumti never takes material birth again, because one gains his spiritual nature. And that's the world which is free from any misery, free from birth and death. Spiritual world, how does it look like? Exactly like the material world, but in its pure form. Whatever deterioration you find in this material world is not present in the spiritual world. Everything else is there. You will have families, you will have bliss, festivals, so many people. Everything is there in the association of the Lord. That's why 15th chapter of the Gita describes this world as a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. The real world is up there. That's where we are supposed to go. And we have to go somewhere, aspire for that place. He says, from Brahma's planet to the lowest, all are places of misery. ऐसा मत सोचो कि you gain Brahma's position and you'll be happy. Anxiety is there everywhere. Brahma's anxiety is different. Sometimes it happens. We have some problem and our neighbor does not have that problem. So we think he's very happy in life, but it's not like that. We have a problem which he doesn't have, but he has another problem which we do not have, and he's thinking that we are happy. Everybody has problem. Nobody is spared in this world. Dukhalyam ashashvatam. Even Brahma has. Just the nature of problem is different. Just because the other person's nature of problem is different does not mean he is happy. People hide everything. Everybody has to go through. He says Brahma's lifespan, how long it is? Even though Brahma's lifespan is very long. How do you understand this? He says, Sahasra Yuga Pariyantam Aharyad Brahmano Vidu Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam Teho Ratra Vidojana. He says, by human calculation, 1,000 yugas taken together is the duration of Brahma's one day. Just imagine now. So one yuga cycle is 43,20,000 years. Multiply that by 1,000. That is the duration of Brahma's one day, because as you go higher and higher, the time scale changes. And that also is the duration of his night. And at the beginning of Brahma's day, all the living entities come into this existence. When Brahma gets up, at the end of his day, all living entities are annihilated. And they rest in Lord Vishnu's body on Brahma's planet. So again and again, he says Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into existence, then they again die. So this is happening again and again and again. Even Brahma is seeing all this happening, and he also has to die one day. He says this material world is like that, constantly changing, constantly getting created and destroyed. So come out of that illusion of Maya that you can live here forever. He says, but there is yet another unmanifest nature. Unmanifest means unmanifest to our vision, which we can't see, which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is divine, it is supreme, and is never annihilated. He says this material world is constantly getting annihilated, but that part of the creation remains as it is never annihilated. That is my world. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. Tasmat paras tasmatu bhavanyo avyakto avyaktat sanatana yahasa sarveshu bhuteshu nashyastu na vinashyati. And that place, he says, which the Vedantists describe as unmanifest and infallible, that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained it, one never returns, that is my supreme abode. Very nicely, Krishna is giving hint. So here he's just giving a hint about his abode. He's not talking about how it looks like, because because that is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita is simply ABCD of spiritual life. It is not about the advanced subject matter. It is just laying down the foundation. The real structure you will see after we get into Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavat describes the nature of the spiritual world, and other many scripts, the Brahma Vaivarta Puran, they talk about the uh, beauty of Golok Vrindavan, how Krishna's planet looks like. Very nicely explained. There are shops, pathways, palaces. Where is Krishna's palace located? Everything is explained. The whole landscape is given. So he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. So how does one now go back to that abode? He says, that person comes to me. One who reaches my abode never comes back. He has already spoken about the path of bhakti. Now he's again going to emphasize in the next series of verses, 6-7 verses, how out of all these paths, to achieve his supreme abode, bhakti path is the best. Please understand that we are trying to approach God, and he is the only person who can tell us which is the best path to approach him. And he's telling us, he says bhakti path. He says the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all pervading, and everything is situated within him. Unalloyed devotion is the path to reach Krishna. And that is, unalloyed means no mixing, exclusive devotion, not running here and there, no desire for even liberation, no desire for anything in return. Unalloyed devotion. I want to serve you, that's it. No expectation in return. Hell or high, hell or heaven, happiness, distress, I continue my service without any expectation. That is the kind of devotion which purchases Krishna. It must be uninterrupted and unmotivated. In all circumstances, it must continue. We do one day, then we don't do for 2 days, then we again pick it up, then we give it up. Because we have other priorities in life which have no value. And then we say, I am doing bhakti, but I'm not getting what I want. I'm doing. First of all, we are like doing business with God. We are thinking He's a waiter. So there is no unalloyed devotion. Plus, there is interruption. You're doing it, we are doing it whenever we feel like doing it. It's not unalloyed. We are doing it at our convenience. Bhakti begins when we come out of our comfort zone. When the mind is not cooperating, the situation is not cooperating, still we serve Krishna. That is when he gets attracted. Anybody can do when things are going good. But somebody, when the mind, situation, body is not favorable, still a person continues to do service to Krishna. That person purchases Krishna. Krishna gets attracted to that person. That person attracts Krishna's grace. We are the like one party and we'll do it later. Our spiritual practices are so shallow that sometimes we do it in the morning, then during the day, oh, today I didn't get time, I'll do it at night, 12 o'clock, I'll sit and do it, I'll complete. That's also fine, at least if you're doing it sincerely. But but this is not unalloyed devotion. And sometimes you miss that also. And because during the day, we don't get even this much time out of 24 hours to give it a priority. And how can we expect Krishna's mercy then? How can we expect God's grace when we are giving Him the last place on our priority list? Or sometimes not even that. If there is time left extra, then I will do it. So we are just going to transmigrate from one species to the other. It is certain. And then it is explained. I read it somewhere. When the soul gets into other species of life, the soul remembers all the past lives, especially the previous one, when the soul remembers how I did not take full advantage of the human life. I wasted. I did this. I wish I could have taken this chance. And the person cannot do anything now because in other species of life, there is no ability to choose or rectify the mistakes. Only as humans we have this facility. So unalloyed devotion, where is unalloyed devotion in Kali Yuga? Some little thing goes wrong and the finger goes up. Oh, I stopped doing it because I was worshipping Krishna, but still my business did not improve. My relationships started falling apart. Maybe after doing bhakti, it started happening, all this and that, and so many third-class excuses people give. So we should understand we are all fallen, we are all criminals, and somehow understanding that is the first step towards self-realization, humbling ourselves. That we are not doing enough out of 24 hours. If we make a list, make a timetable, how much time are we giving to Krishna, how much time are we giving to our selfish pursuits, we'll be shocked. So let us not have that stereotype understanding of ourselves as being devotees. If we are not willing to dedicate some exclusive time during the day, for some people even dedicating 10 minutes is so difficult. 1 hour bol do tab to they faint out of 24 hours. Today I didn't do in the morning, I did in the evening, Prabhuji. Why? What were you doing during the day? Selfish. We're all selfish. This is all a sign of selfishness. How do we ever get Krishna's grace? How do we ever get God's grace? How do we ever reach His abode? So we have to be at least very, very disciplined. Without discipline, we cannot achieve anything higher, anything worth achieving. And now Krishna in the next few verses explains various times of the day during which a person or the soul leaves this world uh, and what is the destination. Says, O best of the Bharatas, yatra kale to anavrittim, avrittim cheva yogina, prayata yanti tam kalam vakshami bharatarashava. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. Agnir Jyotir aha shuklah Shanmasha Uttarayanam Tatra Prayata Gachanti Brahma Brahma Vidojana. Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery God in the light at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. These are considered auspicious times for leaving this world. When the soul leaves during this time, definitely achieves a higher destination, whoever the person may be. And Bhishma Pitama, specifically when the sun traveled north, that's when he decided to leave his body, if you remember. He was lying on the bed of arrows. And when the soul does not get liberated and comes back. Dhumo ratris tatha Krishna. Shanmasa dakshinayanam tatra chandra masam jyotir yogi prapya nivartate. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back. That mystic yogi who's trying. So even in the yogis, there are conditions. So this is not about ordinary people. This is about, because they go to Yamaraj. But this is about yogis who are trying to pass away from this world. And the time, therefore, that's why I mentioned the yogis can choose their time. So they choose their time, and therefore Bhishma was a great yogi. He chose the time. He waited for that time to leave the body. The yogis can do that, and then at the right moment they leave. But materialistic people, it all is defined by their karma in this world. So he says, now therefore there are two ways of passing away from this world, one in the light and one in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back. When one passes in darkness, he returns. So even if you're a yogi, but if you pass away at the wrong time, you have to come back. He says, but a devotee does not have to worry about when he passes away from this world. Through Arjuna, he's telling us, he says, although the devotees know these two paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. They don't have to worry. A devotee, his destination is fixed. Whether he passes away during the day, at night, in an accident, or apparently an untimely death, they are only taken care of by Krishna. Krishna personally orchestrates their life. Like there was a famous astrologer in Bangalore. Once some devotees went to him to show their palm and horoscope. As soon as he saw them, he said, "Why have you all come to me?" He said, "I can tell you something, seeing your horoscope, your palm today, but tomorrow Krishna will change it. Because Krishna orchestrates his devotees' lives and he keeps changing as and when he sees fit. So you don't need to come to me, you're totally under Krishna. So he takes care of all the things. This palm and what is written in a horoscope, it doesn't really matter in a devotee's life." So even an astrologer of that caliber is saying that a devotee does not have to worry. Therefore, become a Krishna devotee, chant his names regularly, which is the primary spiritual practice in this stage, and be blessed. And then Krishna summarizes everything that he has spoken in the last verse. Vedeshu yaggeshu tapasu cheva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atyeti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upayati chadyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas. Because in text number 27, Krishna asked Arjuna, after explaining the two paths of leaving this world, he says, but you be fixed in devotion. Then question may be, fixed in devotion, I don't have to worry about other things, study, austerity, everything. So Krishna answers that. He says, a person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all this, and at the end, he also reaches the supreme eternal abode. So, simply by engaging in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, prayers, etc., Krishna says one achieves the benefit that a yogi achieves after millions of lifetimes of difficult austerities, studying the Vedas, performing all kinds of yajnas, giving all kinds of charity, performing all kinds of fruitive activities and philosophical pursuits. A person engaged in devotion automatically achieves all these results. Therefore, Bhakti Path is the easiest and the simplest. It includes everything else. When you're sitting and hearing from the Gita, chanting the Lord's holy name, you must understand, you have full faith that this is the best thing you can do in the creation. So this is the path which Krishna says, which reaches me ultimately. Other paths are difficult. Ultimately, unless they come to the level of bhakti, they cannot approach me. Again and again, Krishna expresses this. Only through bhakti can I be known as I am. So simply do chanting and hear from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. These two activities are enough to lead you to perfectional stage of life. And if you can incorporate these in your daily life, spend some time exclusively, then during the day also when you're engaged in your worldly duties, you'll be able to remember Krishna. And Krishna says, this is the perfect situation. And anybody who can live like that, the middle of the chapter he explains, he definitely comes back to me. So we'll be able to remember the Lord even while we are engaged in our prescribed duties. So this is how this chapter ends. And I'll just give you the acronym for this chapter. Acronym is DEAD. First D is text number 1 to 4, which is doubts. Krishna was asked by Arjuna certain questions, certain doubts, and then Krishna starts clarifying. Letter E is text 5 to 8, where Krishna talks about end of life, how one should remember him at the end of life. Letter A, attaining the Supreme, Krishna talks about various paths to attain him. Text number 9 to 22. And letter D, again, 23 to 28, these verses, Krishna emphasizes the path of devotion, devotional service over other paths to attain the perfection of life. So the acronym is DEAD, D-E-A-D. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Prabhuji, I've unmuted them to.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, after Kalki Avatar comes and once Kalyug comes to an end, so will there be establishment of Satyug again?
Yes, it is all cyclic. The Lord establishes the Satyug again, then Treta, then Dwapar, Kali. So this continues.
Okay, so it's like it goes on and on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Continues.
okay. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Prabhuji, somebody wants you to repeat the acronym.
DEAD. 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 Text number 1 to 4 talks about doubts raised by Arjuna, and Krishna is answering those doubts. 1 to 4. E is end of life, that how Krishna is emphasizing one should remember him at the end of life, and that will decide the next destination, the last thoughts. 5 to 8. 9 to 22 is he's talking about attaining the Supreme. There are different paths of attaining the Supreme. Krishna talks about that, emphasizing on bhakti ultimately. And D is text number 23 to 28, devotion. The path of bhakti emphasized even further, especially towards the end. DEAD, devotion. Is that okay? Anything else?
Prabhuji?
Hanji.
Prabhuji, somebody is asking on YouTube, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, how can we plan our day properly and utilize our time wisely?
Yeah, so you have to first figure out how much time can you devote. Then maybe we can help you with that, because there are many, like I do Zoom sessions, and I had sent out this message that if any one of you wants to incorporate some spiritual practices in your day, then please reach out. So almost 180 to 200 people have reached out, and depending on the time, some people have reached out with 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes. So accordingly, I have given them something, and they're all practicing it also. So if you let us know the timing, how much time you can devote, then accordingly we can help you with the practice that you can incorporate.
Prabhuji, there are two more questions. Why have we come down in this material world when there is bliss and purity in Krishna's dham? And then our following question is, once we go to Krishna's dham, do we come back again to this material world?
Who said that? What is the question?
Madhurora.
What is the
Prabhuji, the
question?
question is, why we have come down in this material world when there is bliss and purity in Krishna's dham? And the following question by Madhurora is, once we go to Krishna's dham, do we come back again to this material world?
Yeah, why we have come down is we have misused our free will. So free will is something that is never ever taken away from the living entities. So in the spiritual world, there is complete harmony, but when sometimes the living entity develops a desire to live independent of God, then that is sent to the material world, because the living entity cannot be allowed to live in the spiritual realm then. So we have come here out of our own free will. So now we are trying to rectify ourselves. Just like a father has many children. Now sometimes one child decides to leave home. That's his choice. Misusing the free will, thinking that he would be happy being independent, but that's when the real misery begins. And once we go back, uh, it is said one does not come back, because you remember all the bad experiences that you have been through. Although you can still choose, you have the choice, but the thing is, you don't generally do it. When you've touched fire and you've been burned, you don't want to put your hand again in fire. So there is 0.01% chance that you will come back misusing your free will. You will not be forced, but it's your choice. Either we can be in the material realm or in the spiritual realm. That's why choice is ours. We are only responsible for the situation we are in today. Nobody else is responsible. So by desire we are here. By desire we can be up there also forever. Our desires decide our destination. Hare Krishna. Yes, next question.
Yeah, Prabhuji. So, if I want to incorporate reading Gita in my life, how do I go about it?
Who is this?
Bhavna Adyani. In fact, she has asked 3 questions, one after the other. I'll just read all 3. So this was one. If I want to incorporate reading Gita in my life, how do I go about it? Then she has asked, start from beginning or just open any page, or since she has completed Gita classes with you since March.
So now, Bhavnaji, what you can do, since you have already heard all the audios, now you can just pick up the Gita and start from chapter number 1, or start with the introduction if you have the Gita as it is. Now everything will make more sense because you have already heard the explanations. So I think just pick it up and spend some time every day. Maybe half an hour also will be good to begin with. Today's Ekadashi, you can start today itself. And it's very, very nice that we've had this session on Ekadashi, because on Ekadashi, anything little you do, the results, the benefits are million times more compared to any other regular day. So let us be grateful to Krishna for that. And koi bhi shubh cheez mein, scriptures are very clear. Puranas explain that anything which is auspicious, we should never procrastinate it. We should immediately do it. And anything which is inauspicious, we should try to procrastinate it as much as possible. तो अगर मन में इच्छा आती है कभी भी भगवान के लिए कुछ करने की, चैंट करने की, स्टडी करने की, do it immediately. Never procrastinate. Because procrastination का एक system है. Anything that you procrastinate, you never end up doing that. So if you procrastinate anything which is good, you will never do it ever. So do it immediately. Start as soon as the desire pops up, because you're never sure which other thought will pop up in the mind next moment. Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Prabhuji, there's one question on Zoom chat by Sunita Kumar, Sunita Kumar. She's saying, Prabhuji, how to know the purpose of my birth?
Purpose of my birth? Know from the scriptures. We can't know. See, the purpose of birth is explained clearly. Anybody who is born as a human being, I have been explaining this throughout the lecture. Human life is only meant for self-realization. Everything else is an immediate goal. Ultimate goal is self-realization. Like there are 8.4 million types of bodies, 84 lakh. And all these different types of bodies have their advantages, disadvantages, and they are meant for the fulfillment of a particular purpose. So human life is meant for the fulfillment of the purpose of self-realization, God realization, putting an end to the cycle of birth and death, putting an end to the cycle of karma, rectifying our past mistakes, and also, as I said, as is explained in this verse, cultivate divine consciousness so that we can go back to the real world where we actually belong, because any other species of life do not have this facility. So the human life is specially given for putting an end to our material existence and regaining our spiritual nature. That is the purpose. Everything else that people have made their purpose is simply illusion. We should never lose focus. We can do those things also, but without losing focus of this ultimate goal. This is the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose is explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prema Pumartho Mahan. To develop love for Krishna, he explains. The ultimate goal should be to develop love for Krishna. How do we develop that? By hearing, chanting, etc. This process. So engage in hearing and chanting Krishna's glories, name, fame, and your love for Krishna will keep developing. Incorporate that practice in your daily routine and you see your love growing. And that is the purpose, goal of life. Everyone's purpose. Not just your purpose. Everyone's purpose is that. We have got into this material existence. Let's do something to end it now. So if we can remember the Lord at the last moment, we go back to Him. That is the perfection of life. If we are born as a human being, but if we don't attain that supreme destination, then we have failed in our human life. So success is if we can remember Him at the last moment and go back to Him. That is the success. Hare Krishna. Anything
so,
else?
Prabhuji, there's one last question on YouTube by Devang Mehta. He's saying Raja Bharat remembers a deer in his last moments and becomes a deer. But Ajamil does not mean to remember the Lord, but says Narayan and gets liberated, though he does not mean to.
Yeah, because that's the power of the name. The story of Ajamil is there to describe the power of the name. The name of God is non-different from him. So even though he called out Narayan, addressing his son, but the name of the Lord was chanted. And the name is non-different from God. Therefore, he got the same benefit. Therefore, the scriptures are filled with unlimited verses glorifying the name of God. Among all the spiritual practices, the supreme is chanting of his names, and it is the easiest and the simplest. And I would request everyone to incorporate this. Chant some fixed number of rounds, and you see the benefit. If by unconsciously chanting Narayan, one could get second chance, one could be brought back from death, brought back to life. Imagine if somebody is consciously making it. That is the special power of the name. Whether you chant it consciously, subconsciously, out of love, out of contempt, the benefit is the same ultimately. In the case of Bharat Maharaj, he was not chanting and he became attached to a deer, and that was the only thought in his mind. Whereas Ajamil did not die. He chanted, called out the Lord's name, and therefore he was protected. He got his life back, and then he continued to chant till the end of his life at Haridwar on the banks of Ganga. In the end, he was taken to the spiritual world. But nothing like this is mentioned in the case of Bharat Maharaj. He thought about a deer. It is clearly explained he had given up his spiritual practices. And the last thought was deer, so he became a deer. Ajamil's last thought was not of that of deer. His last thought was the Lord only, because he continued to live after that incident. Hare Krishna. So I think I'll stop here.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.